acknowledgement of country.
Oh, okay.
If you need.
Thank you. So on behalf of the Australian Compassion Council, I warmly welcome everyone on this call from around Australia and indeed around the world to the 2022 National Day of Compassion, where our theme this year is deep listening. During this day, we will highlight and give attention to the many meaningful acts of compassion that are occurring across Australia. And in so doing, the Australian Charter honours the work of the Global Charter for Compassion. The Global Charter is both a document and a worldwide movement where everyone is committed to living by the principle, value and motivation of compassion. And we are very pleased to have representatives from the Australian and Global Charter with us in this live event as we launch this National Day. A day which is just one of the ways in which we are deep dreaming Australia, a continent for compassion. My name is Lynn Reader and I'm the National Lead of the Australian Compassion Council. I am on Wadawurrung land and I pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. We do that just by this short reflection that we explore the rhythm of this land by listening to the echoes of its ancient culture. And Margaret, I might hand to you if you would do an acknowledgement of country. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn.
So I introduce Margaret Hepworth, who is from Initiatives of Change. Thanks, Margaret.
Thanks, Lynn. And thank you for creating this wonderful, wonderful forum on this very special day. So in the spirit of a new understanding of reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge the continuing custodians of this country. For me, this is the Wurundjeri people and neighbouring Boonwurrung and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nations. And I'd like you just to stop for a moment and reflect on the custodians of the land where you are now sitting. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge their connection to land, sea and community, and to what they bring, what they offer as we continue to walk and work with the First Nations peoples of this country. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Thank you. So this National Day is just one of the ways in which we honour our intention of deep dreaming Australia, a continent for compassion. And from its very beginning, the Australian Compassion Council has always sought to honour our Indigenous heritage. And we have done that not by developing plans, policies or strategies, but by deep dreaming from tens of thousands of years ago to illuminate how we Australians can better look after each other. And in dreaming that together, we have developed this approach of deep listening and deep dreaming. We were to have our Indigenous Ambassador, Al Harris, here with us this morning, but I'm a bit concerned that Al hasn't been able to join us. He hasn't been very well at all and has been, sort of at home, but having hospital care at home. So we do send our deep wishes to Al. So let me now turn to the work of the Charter. The work of the Charter in Australia is shaped and overseen by the Australian Compassion Council, and you'll meet each of their council members in this live event. And to start to learn more about what we have been doing, I'll now hand over to ACC member Gwen Pinnington, who is going to provide a short overview of the activities that we have undertaken in the past year. Thank you, Gwen.
Thanks, Lynn, and welcome everyone. This past year has been another big year for the Charter for Compassion in Australia, as we continue to follow our journey in deep dreaming Australia, a continent for compassion. The main ways that the Australia Compassion Council is doing that dreaming is through its cities work, its sectors work, National Day activities, as well as our contribution to the work of the Global Charter. Here are some highlights from the past 12 months. Last year's National Day of Compassion was very successful with presentations by our ambassadors, Dr. Ursula Stevens and Hugh Mackay, in our live event. And we created over 12 hours of video discussions that were streamed through the day on the Global Charter's Facebook page. With our city's work, Compassionate Ballarat hosted a collective trauma forum at the Ballarat Art Gallery that brought together international speakers from Compassionate Belfast, the European Forum for Restorative Justice, and the US Human Values Institute to discuss the ways in which cities are responding to collective trauma events such as COVID and natural disasters. The outcomes were written up into a report that urged local councils to move towards a healing-focused community and included a series of recommendations around compassionate design. Terry Ailing in Compassionate Gold Coast recognized the concern the Russian invasion of Ukraine was causing in Australia and brought together the heads of the local Ukraine and Russian churches to provide spiritual guidance to them and their wider local community. In our sector work, we focused on some specific areas this past year. For the business sector, myself and Dr. Mark Crosweller ran and distributed a webinar on the ethics of compassionate leadership. I also facilitated a panel discussion with Australian leaders on compassion in leadership, the business case for compassion. In the education sector, we ran a forum entitled Let's Start at the Very Beginning, Recent Development in Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health. And Dr. Sue Sumskis also ran a webinar discussion on compassion at work in education. For the peace sector, Madonna Quixley ran an online presentation that featured the former Australian World Vision Director, Tim Costello, on the ethics of peace, peaceful people creating peaceful societies. In the health sector, Dr. Debbie Ling created and ran a number of training modules on common humanity in healthcare. And in the science and research sector, Dr. Lynn Reeder and Professor Felicia Huppert ran and held our annual conference on the science of compassion, at which world-leading compassion researchers Dr. Paul Gilbert and Dr. Tanya Singer both spoke. In terms of our contribution to the Global Charter, our involvement included contributions to their Global Read program by our Indigenous advisor, Al Harris, in conversation with Dr. Tyson Yunkaporta on Tyson's book, Sand Talk, How Indigenous Thinking Can Change the World. Hopefully this gives you a quick high-level overview of some of the ways we've been deep dreaming Australia, a continent for compassion over the past 12 months. Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks, Gwen. Thanks for that great overview. So at the beginning of our formation, we were very honoured that well-known author, psychologist and social scientist Hugh Mackay accepted our invitation to be the National Ambassador here in Australia. Hugh has been very involved in all our work, and we thank him very much for his valued support and thoughtful guidance. For his National Day contribution, Hugh is reflecting on the importance of compassion and deep listening for today's world. Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you very much, Lynn. And good morning, afternoon or evening, depending what time it is where you are. Yes, Lynn has asked me to reflect on the importance of compassion and deep listening for today's world. Today's world, a world of growing geopolitical tensions, a world in which there's a growing awareness of the existential threat to our life on this planet from the looming effects of climate change. Obviously, at a time like this, we do need an urgent reminder of what it actually means to be human. It means that we belong to a social species. It means that we need each other. It means that we're hopeless in isolation. In other words, being human, we're born to cooperate, we're born to connect, we're born to communicate. And that in turn means we're born to care for each other, to attend to each other, to acknowledge each other. Relationships, connections, These are absolutely essential to human flourishing, and conversations are a vital part of that project. Conversations is how we mostly connect, cooperate, and communicate. But what's the point of a conversation if we don't listen to each other? And what's the point of listening if we don't open ourselves up to each other? Deep listening is not just hearing. It's not physiology, it's psychology. Deep listening is attentive, empathic listening in which we are taking a risk. And the risk we're taking is that we might be changed by what we hear. In fact, if you don't sense that you're running that risk, then you're not really listening, you're just hearing. Deep listening is one of the kindest, one of the most compassionate, one of the most therapeutic things we can do for each other. Just reflect for a moment on what it means to someone when you listen attentively and empathically to them, without needing to put it into words. Simply by listening, you are saying, I take you seriously enough to bother listening to you. I take you seriously enough to entertain the ideas that you want to express. By the way, I might not like them at all. We might end up having a very robust argument about all of this. But for the time being, you have the floor. I am trying to imagine what it must be like to be you. That's what deep listening is. Deep listening is entering into the world of the other person so we can see from their point of view what they're trying to say. So when we listen, that's what we're implying. Yep, I'm going to entertain your ideas. I'm going to enter into your world for as long as you need me to, in order for me to hear what you have to say. But consider the opposite. Consider what is implied, without having to put it into words, when we don't listen, when we withhold the generous, risky, therapeutic gift of listening. What we're saying, without needing to put it into words, is, sorry, I don't take you seriously enough to bother listening to what you have to say. Sorry, I'm not prepared even to entertain your ideas. Sorry, I'm just not able or willing to put myself in your shoes. Now, would you ever say to another person explicitly, sorry, I don't take you seriously enough to bother listening to what you have to say? You wouldn't say that, would you, to a partner or a child or a colleague or a neighbour or a friend? It would be too hurtful, it would be too offensive. Yet when we withhold the therapeutic gift of deep listening, that's the message we send. It's only by listening to each other that we qualify ourselves to agree or disagree. I mentioned a moment ago that when I've entertained your ideas, I might not like them at all. Listening doesn't mean acquiescence. Listening means I put myself in the position of being able to respond to what you're saying because I have understood it, because I've accepted I haven't accepted necessarily what you're saying, but I've accepted that this is your view. I'm not qualified to agree or disagree with anyone until I've fully heard their point of view. So it's only by listening to each other that we qualify ourselves even to disagree. It's only by listening to each other that we start to build bridges across the chasms that threaten to divide us, perhaps more than ever in the contemporary world, when in so many, particularly Western societies, we are experiencing social fragmentation, an erosion of social cohesion, an obsession with our personal identity, at the expense very often of our sense of common humanity. And of course, it's only by deep listening that we can begin the process of healing a wounded world, one conversation at a time. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Hugh. That's just a very thoughtful reflection for us all to take away today. And I very much like that idea of the risk that we take when we deep listen to someone else because it might change us. What a challenge for us all today. Thank you so much. Hugh has reminded us of why, if we are to be a continent for compassion, that we need to apply deep listening in all areas of Australian life, and particularly our Indigenous people. So this morning we were to have Uncle Shane Charles join us, but unfortunately he is not able to do that. But to represent him, we have his close colleague, Mark Hepworth, who is the Executive Officer at Initiatives of Change. Uncle Shane Charles is a proud Yorta Yorta man and co-chair of Victoria Reconciliation, and has also a cultural residency at Initiatives of Change. So Margaret and Uncle Shane Charles work closely together. So thank you, Mark, who's going to talk about bringing deep listening to achieve more deeper outcomes in voice and treaty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Womanjeka, everyone. Welcome. And Womanjeka, it means we come with intent. And today we're coming with this intent to bring more compassion and love into this world. And thank you, Lynn. Yes, huge apologies from Uncle Shane. He is in sorry business at the moment. He sends his love. We do work very closely together at Initiatives of Change Australia, and Uncle Shane, we're very blessed to have him living at our centre in Armour. He brings all sorts of extraordinary learning to the work that we're doing in working with First Nations elders and leaders, particularly in our work in truth telling and truth hearing and deep listening. So today, just focusing deeply on how we can bring this deep listening across what we're now being called to consider, which is a voice in the an Indigenous voice in the Constitution. And I love what Hugh just offered us, this idea that deep listening is a therapeutic gift. So if we can hold that while we sort of examine this concept. So that we have been offered in 2017, the Uluru Statement from the Heart. It is a stunning document that really offers, excuse me, solutions for this country. It is a deeply spiritual call. And at the same time, it's very pragmatic. It is both personal and collective. It's political and strategic, and it is an invitation for all Australians to walk together in a pathway to justice and healing for a better future for our country. So if we can apply this deep listening over the Uluru Statement from the Heart and to what it's really asking us to do. And to do that, you need to go away after this webinar and read it again and listen and really go into that deep listening, because it's asking for a call to action, for a voice in the Constitution. Now, Uncle Glenn Lockery, a Wiradjuri man, he helps us unpack this, and he says at the centre of voice, treaty, truth, and makarata is justice. And it is, if we stop and we listen, we apply this level of deep listening, we begin to move to that point of really knowing what is right and how do we address wrongs of the past by bringing a better sense of justice to where we are at now. So I want to take you on a little bit of a journey in a way. I want to look at deep listening as a practice. At Initiatives of Change, we practice something called quiet time. And it's a daily practice. And of course, the more you do this, the deeper this practice becomes. Some people meditate, some people pray. And now we have, or not now, we've had forever in this country, this sense of dadiri. And if you've never heard of dadiri, the deep listening, please do go and look up the videos of Miriam Rose. And you'll really start to learn how to, as Hugh said, not just listen to hear, but listen to feel into and understand. So for the past 250 years, as a collective, we have really failed custodianship of this continent. And it actually, we've come with a view of being landowners and land grabbers rather than seeing ourselves as custodians. And again, it's through a practice of deep listening that we can change our attitudes to become better custodians of this country. I really just want you for 20 seconds to stop and listen to that word, custodians. Just hold that in your mind. What does it mean to be a custodian of this country? And it's interesting, isn't it, when we pause like that and don't continue speaking, we feel into it rather than just hear it. So how do we all become better custodians? And how does this relate back to this idea of justice and voice and treaty and truth and Makarrata? Just before COVID hit us all, I had the privilege to walk the songlines in Broome, 90 kilometres. We walked with the Gullabarulu community, and they tell us that they have been custodians of this country no matter what, no matter that the pastoralists came and claimed the country, no matter that the government says we own the country, they never stopped being custodians. And what we were taught as we walked 90 kilometres of this beautiful country was to feel into our lian, that's our gut intuitive connectedness to country. More recently, I was so privileged to be part of a very small group where Uncle Shane took us on a journey to Kamaraganja, that up to Yorta Yorta country. And again, as we travelled, as we journeyed, he took us up into the Barmah forest. He took us to Dacia's paddock. Now, Dacia's paddock is the place where Archie Roach was taken as a child. We went into the township of Kamaraganja, which is an Aboriginal township. Now, it was the journeying, the pausing, the listening, the sitting, the feeling, where through that deep listening and connecting with country, we were then able to hear better the crisis of what is still happening in our country for First Nations peoples. So I'm encouraging everyone to grab these opportunities, right, to connect with First Nations peoples, come and visit us at Initiatives of Change at our centre, to come on these cultural intelligence immersions. Because the more we do this, the better we will understand what is being asked in this call to a voice in the Constitution, right? So we can look at the voice from an academic perspective, and that's good. We should do that kind of intellectual learning, but we need to feel into it. We need to hear the truth of what has happened in this country and acknowledge it and find how to move on. Mm-hmm. So we're now looking into First Nations knowledge solutions. We're looking into what has kept this continent in harmony for 60,000 plus years. That's environmentally, it's socially, it's through governance. Now, isn't that interesting when you hear that ESG? That's what corporates are now talking about. Well, we want these corporates to come and examine how First Nations people have done this for thousands of years and are still doing it now. They are continuing custodians. So environmentally, socially, and governance. We're forming something called a wisdom leadership think tank, and we're looking at intercultural knowledge. So that's First Nations knowledge and knowledge, wisdom knowledge in all its forms. And if we reflect back what Hugh spoke about earlier, can you imagine if across this world our leaders applied wisdom leadership and deep listening and utilize this to solve issues? So I'll finish up there. I'm inviting everyone to listen to country, to listen to truth, into knowing what is right. And we're going to circle all that way back into justice to know our next steps. And I'll leave it there. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. That's been a key contribution to today and to our future work. And just bringing all those important aspects. As you say, there are different ways of connecting and engaging, and that's the deep dreaming that we're wanting to include in the planning and etc. So thank you. So today, this launch is the start of the National Day, and there are quite a number of events that are happening throughout the day. So now I'll hand over to fellow council member, Dr. Sue Sumskis, who will let you know how you can participate in this National Day. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you. We invite everyone to take part in the National Day activities that are scheduled throughout today and to connect with others through offering them the gift of deep listening and inviting them along also to experience the day's activities. At 9:15 a.m. on the Global Charter's Facebook page, you can listen to many short recorded interviews on specific aspects of deep listening. At 10:30 a.m, New South Wales participants can join the YAS Library for their Living Library event, and Victorian participants can join the empathy session, which is coming from Ballarat. At 11 a.m, our online compassionate listening course is offered. Please register if you would like to attend that event and become a better listener. At 2 p.m, we invite you to grab some chocolate and a cup of coffee or a cup of chai tea and be ready to enjoy an online conversation led by Andrea Putting, the founder of Chocolate and Coffee Breaks. At 3:30 p.m, you can join a special deep listening experience offered by Ballarat Palliative Care. And at 4:45 p.m, you can support our very quiet native platypus species by engaging in the Platy Project. And at any time throughout today, wherever you are, please offer the gift of deep listening to your friends and family, or perhaps anybody who comes along in your path, by taking the time to start a conversation that is generous, open, and trusting. And one last upcoming event, on the 29th of September, you are invited to attend the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra Night of Compassion at the Melbourne Town Hall. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Sue. We do hope that you will all consider doing at least one of these activities during today. So the work of the Charter in Australia is supported by the Global Charter Office, and the ACC very much appreciates the support, particularly that of Executive Director Marilyn Turkovich, whose knowledge and ideas are most valued. And I'd like to now invite Marilyn to provide an affirmation of the intention to deep dream Australia, a continent for compassion. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thanks, Lynn. It's really wonderful to be here, and especially Marge with Initiatives of Change, which is a charter partner, and certainly reacquainting with Hugh. Hugh has become not only a treasure from Australia, but certainly to the whole Charter for Compassion globally. You know, when the idea of deep dreaming came about, it was really exciting because think about it. Every one of our compassionate communities around the world can be doing this dreaming. Compassionate Pakistan or India, the United Kingdom, Mexico, etc. This is the exciting part, isn't it? The dreaming part. How is it that we can be different? How is it that we can change our own lives by changing also the environment around us? You know, that's almost like the first step, having the dream, isn't it? And then the second step, which is what we're doing right now, the deep listening. This is a hard step and it's a long step. It really makes us begin to understand how our perspective is not the right perspective. It invites us to challenge our own wisdom and to broaden our own thinking. It invites us, by listening to others, to understand what's important in their lives, what's keeping them back. It's also an opportunity for us to begin to question, what is it that we don't know? Why don't we know it? What are those missing pages of our history, whether it's personal history or if it's cultural history or those historical chronological pieces of history? The other thing is that as we begin to understand and look at each other culturally and understand the etymology of the language that we have, we also begin to think differently. And I think that's all part of the deep listening part. But the other thing that we experience in this whole idea of deep listening is the interconnectedness of each one of us. Each one of us, people who live down the street, in our region, across the globe. Once we begin to pull all of these pieces together and look to the wisdom of our first peoples, and as I love the fact that through the years now with Compassionate Australia, we've been talking about, the new people to our shores and the messages and the lessons that they're bringing. This is our challenge, that we adopt all of this, that we mix it up. We talk about the diversity of the world, and it's right on our shores, and it's so rich. And we're so proud to have Compassionate Australia to be just a real part of the Charter for Compassion. And when Gwen was talking about all of the wonderful things that Australia has done regionally, locally, it has given a tremendous gift to the Charter for Compassion globally. Back to you, Lynn.
Good. Thank you so much, Marilyn. So appreciate that affirmation. And it means a lot to us that the members of the Global Charter have made a commitment to be here with us this morning. And the work that we do here in Australia certainly contributes and honours the global movement, in the way that we can, and bring our unique perspective to that. And particularly acknowledging, the ways in which compassion are essential to all human relationships and to a caring humanity. And now we turn to something very special, which is a first look at a new global initiative that is seeking to explore the creation of a critical mass of compassionate actions across the world. Many of you will know Dr. Rick Hanson. Rick is a psychologist and a New York Times best-selling author and a senior fellow at UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center. So I'm so honoured that Rick is here with us today, and also have to say very honoured that Marilyn and I are members of this exciting new global coalition, Compassion Coalition. So thank you, Rick.
Oh, thank you, Lynn, and greetings to my friend Marilyn as well. I'm speaking now on Miwok land in Northern California. Australia is particularly close to my own heart, and it's an honor to be here with you. Hearing the speakers so far, I've been really struck by how much deep listening is at the heart, really, of being human, and it's at the foundation of any healthy relationship and any healthy organization, community, country, even whole wide world. When we listen deeply, I'm a longtime therapist and a neuropsychologist, we recognize the being behind the eyes of the other person. I was very touched also by what Hugh Mackay had said about this. It rang really true for me. We feel them. We offer the generosity to actually receive the other person and establish an empathic sense of them. Deep listening gives to all of us, both the listener and the listenee, it gives to all of us the gift that we all need to feel that others are present with us so that we can feel truly heard, in a sense like we've landed in some way with that other person. Neurologically, deep listening has been increasingly studied, and it creates a kind of coherence, literally, physiologically, among the brains of the people who are present with each other in this vital way. Additionally, deep listening is the necessary basis for true compassion, which recognizes the weight of life on people and gives us a feeling for their stresses and sorrows, including our own, when we bring compassion to ourselves. When we feel compassion, it leads naturally to feeling moved to ease suffering and to change its causes. Deep listening and compassion are transformational at the individual level. We've all experienced this, everyone participating in this marvelous undertaking of a day of compassion in Australia and deep listening as its theme. We've all experienced that individually. Now, just imagine what this could do at the societal level. Just imagine what could happen if we built institutions that truly prioritized the ending of preventable suffering, institutions that were deeply tuned in to the actual needs of humanity and the actual needs of our one precious planet. Just imagine what could happen if we mobilized the will and skill of political leaders and business leaders to make a world that worked well for everyone, not just a fortunate few. Just imagine what could happen if the compassionate majority worldwide came together at a scale that could make the real difference we long for and reestablish caring and sharing, compassion and justice as the foundation of every society. It might seem easy to dismiss these imaginings as mere hopeful wishes for a better future, but actually there is a way to turn them into tangible, effective reality. Recently, people from around the world have come together to form the Global Compassion Coalition. With crucial early support from the Charter for Compassion, thank you, Marilyn, and also crucial early support from Lynn Reeder, James Kirby, and numerous others in Australia. This coalition will be truly international and diverse, and respectful of differences, with an open hand of invitation to all. We're very practical, and very serious about accomplishing real things. We will support compassion science, compassion education, applications of compassion, and compassion advocacy and activism to build a world in which people and nature are really cared for and thrive. We will pursue a major influence campaign to make compassion a central value in our schools and other institutions and in our laws and policies. And we will help to gather together the combined forces of good-hearted people and organizations around the world to push for the big changes, such as avoiding climate catastrophe, that the urgency of our times calls for. These aims are ambitious, for sure, but they have to be. Humanity faces many challenges: poverty, hunger, and the long shadow of prejudice and discrimination, to name a few. And our response must be equal to them. When we bring deep listening to the cries of the world, of course, we feel moved and called to help. So many people and organizations are already helping, and we're learning about some of them in this beautiful day of compassion. By coming together as a whole in a worldwide coalition, we can make an impact that will be much greater than the sum of our parts. In the Global Compassion Coalition, we're currently putting the building blocks in place and we'll be launching this initiative early next year. We want to be working with as many like-minded individuals and organizations as possible. We want you there to shape and influence what we're doing, to straighten us out sometimes, to be and to feel a part of this wider whole, and to help put compassion and justice. I so appreciated the mention of justice previously. Compassion and justice at the foundation of every society. We will have a temporary website before the end of September that will give you the chance to register your support and become a part of this global coalition, and all are welcome. Meanwhile, if you want to know more about what we're doing and how to get involved, there's an email address, which I'll repeat, info@globalcompassioncoalition.org, info@globalcompassioncoalition.org, that will let you reach our team. I'd like to finish by saying this. When we engage in deep listening, something vital in the core of our being is touched and moved. It is deep and primal and good. There is a power in this, a magnificent courage in the human spirit to reach out, to reach across the lines that divide us, and to grow the common good. Each of us in our own way does this in deep listening, with effects rippling out in ways seen and unseen to touch many others. And as we listen deeply together, may this help and heal our one shared, vulnerable, and precious world. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. What a wonderful contribution to our day, and another amazing call to action. I hope people are feeling very moved by all these calls to action. We are just so blessed to have you, Marilyn, Hugh, Margaret. It's just been wonderful. And you've been, outlining the work of this vital, I think, crucial global initiative, as you say. And it's not optional, I think, at this time in human development. So thank you so much, Rick. Thank you. And actually, in that context, I'll now hand back to Marilyn to invite you all to become involved in the work of the Charter for Compassion as well. Thank you, Marilyn.
Sorry, I put myself on mute. There's an invitation, an open invitation to all of you, not only to be members of the Charter for Compassion Australia, but to the Global Charter for Compassion. And one of the things is that we really consider ourselves to be a network of networks. And so with over 450 compassionate cities in 54 countries and almost close to 3,000 partners, I don't know what our membership is, quite honestly. I don't know how many people have signed the Charter for Compassion, because in so many places in the world, everyone is taking its own count. But we're guessing it's around 3 million, 4 million people. You know, is that enough for the tipping point? We sure hope so. And so one of the things about compassion is that there is no compassion without action. And so we want you to join our family. And look at all of the ways that you can become very involved in what's going on with the environment, with business, with healthcare, etc. So we are excited, and I just put up the Charter for Compassion website. You can go there. You can sign up for our newsletter, learn a little bit more about us before you commit to the Charter itself. Lynn started by saying the Charter is both a document and a movement. The document is just about 360 plus words, and it's boiled down to the golden rule. And if you look at the actions that are taking part in the Charter, perhaps you'll find a home and a new family of friends with whom you can work. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Marilyn. And, throughout this morning, we've been hearing about the various aspects of deep listening and compassion, and Rick, Hugh, Marg have really just sort of given us very different perspectives. But all leading us in the same direction. And so now I wanted to hand over to two other members of the Australian Compassion Council, Terry Ailing and Dr. Debbie Ling, who are going to look at some of the pillars of compassion as we have outlined them here in Australia. Thanks, Terry and Debbie.
Thank you, Lynn, and welcome everybody. The Australian Compassion Council understands that compassion flows out of our understanding of our common humanity and its expression with wisdom. Just like me, no one wants to suffer. And just like me, everyone wants to be safe and happy. When we see ourselves in the other, whether in a personal relationship as partner, parent or child, or a professional setting as doctor or patient, teacher or student, we are more likely to respond with compassion. Whilst there may be blocks to our compassion based on our context or experience, it's important we exercise wisdom in determining our expression of compassion. In the Australian context, over many years, successive governments and religious organisations may have thought it was compassionate to remove Aboriginal children from their parents and to bring them up in white families, educate them in school and in the Western ways of living. But in time, it became tragically clear this wasn't wise and has caused irreparable damage to countless Aboriginal people over the generations. Deep listening is essential in our gleaning of wisdom. The songlines of wisdom ring out in our spiritual and religious traditions, in philosophical thought, and they also arise out of our own lived and observed experience and through our intuition. When we are truly present to another, when we deeply listen, not only audibly beside the words, but empathically between the words, intuitively beneath the words, and spiritually beyond the words, wisdom gives us the ability to see past shallow appearances and see true suffering and need.
Thanks, Terry. And I'll just briefly add that compassion is wired into our evolutionary biology. We're wired to have care, connection, and compassion, and it's the basis of survival of our species. And in fact, it's not just humans who do this. Lots of animal species, dolphins, elephants, they have cooperative behaviour. So science is really showing now, functional MRI brain imaging is showing that compassion is actually crucial and improves the well-being of the giver, not just the receiver. So it's called helpers high. So it's a wonderful thing to see that science is now really backing up the deep wisdom of many traditions that have been around for thousands of years, talking about the golden rule, treat others as we would like to be treated, and also highlighting our common humanity and interconnectedness. Thanks, Lynn. Good.
Thanks, Debbie and Terry. And our final speaker is Dr. Mark Crosweller, our final Australian Council member. And Mark will now provide an invitation for us all to make this National Day a very meaningful one. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Lynn. Good morning, colleagues. What a great insight into deep learning, compassion, human suffering, relatedness, what it means to be people, what it means to be connected. Just an extraordinary array of speakers. If not now, when? If not us, then who? It's really important that we take on board the messages of today and put them into action. If I can briefly reflect upon the story, my career has been in crisis and emergency management for 40 years. I learned many years ago that sometimes the best way to help a person in crisis who had lost everything, who had suffered immensely, who had nothing left in this world other than the clothes they had on their back, was to stop and to listen. Was to genuinely listen to their experience, to hold space with them. I remember in the Canberra fires in 2003, we lost 500 houses in one afternoon and 4 people in a fire that was never meant to happen. We went into the streets the next morning and spoke to the residents. I remember coming across a bunch of teenagers, 16, 17 years of age. They'd saved half the street. They saved about 10 houses between 4 of them. And they were devastated. They were devastated because they didn't save more houses. They were really hard on themselves. Those of us in uniform got off the trucks, sat down on the curb in the street and sat down with these teenagers and listened to their stories and validated their efforts and validated their experience. So I'm sure we saved them 10 years of psychological counselling because we brought our expertise and our knowledge and our understanding and our insight, but we didn't speak, we listened. When we heard their story and we heard their suffering and we heard their experience, we're able to validate and to help them work through it. That was 20 years ago, and it still sits very fresh in my mind even today. So today is a call to action. There are many things online today that we can participate in, but it doesn't stop today, of course. I think as Hugh has said, as Rick has said, as Marilyn has said, this is a part of being human. It's a part of who we are. So today it certainly is a call to action. It's a call to action from this day forward. And I welcome everybody to join us, the Charter of Compassion, the International Charter, to take this step forward into our organisation, into our families and our communities, and see what sort of difference it could make, not only to our happiness, but the happiness of those that we care very much about. Thanks, Lynn.
Good. Thanks, Mark. And as you can hear from the contributions from each of the members of the Australian Compassion Council, Terry Ailing, Dr. Debbie Ling, Gwen Pinnington, Dr. Mark Crosweller, Dr. Sue Sumskis and myself, the Australian Charter is really being well supported in its work in Australia. I now have the pleasure of thanking you all, wherever you are in Australia or around the world, for being with us today. We very deeply appreciate your presence with us. I also wanted to say that today is the International Day of Peace, and one of the sectors of the Charter is the peace sector, and we have done quite a bit of work in the peace sector associated with particularly the videos that you will be able to view from 9:15 this morning. As Gwen mentioned earlier, 7 hours of these wonderful interviews of every aspect of deep listening starts at 9:15 on the Global Charter's Facebook page. Madonna Quixley is the peace coordinator for the Australian Charter. And there are a number of those interviews, including John Hunter from the World Peace Games. So we thank the Charter Global representatives for zooming in and looking after us today from the US and Mexico, for other members of the Global Charter Board, for our ambassadors, Al Harris, who is in my heart. I'm deeply concerned and hoping that all is well for Alan Harris, for Hugh Mackay, who are very important contributors to our work. And as Gwen mentioned, also Dr. Ursula Stevens, who was our inaugural ambassador. And on behalf of the Australian Compassion Council, and also, for Mark, being able to step in for Uncle Shane Charles and Rick, wonderful presentation, Rick, and very exciting to get that sense of what's going to happen, you know, at that, you know, we talk about a critical mass, but bringing all those groups together, including the work of the Charter, is just amazing. And thank you so much for your for joining us from the US today, as Marilyn has as well. And I invite you on behalf of the Australian Compassion Council to stay connected to our work as we deep dream Australia, a continent for compassion. And I invite you to also view the updates on our webpage, charterforcompassion.com.au. So thank you so much, everyone. It's been a wonderful start to this 2022 National Day of Compassion. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Bye for now.